Hey guys, Jocelyn here with Fantasia Elegance. I have received some requests to do more chainmail style jewelry tutorials, so today I thought I'd show you how to do this Celtic inspired kind of chainmail weave style. You can do it either in a line like I have here on the right for bracelets or necklaces, and you can also turn it into this cute little flower looking motif like I have on the left, so I'll be showing you how to do both styles of that today. As far as tools and materials goes, you will need 2 pairs of chain nose pliers for opening and closing jump rings, and we will of course be needing some jump rings. I'm going to be working with some 6mm inner diameter 18 gauge jump rings and some 3.5mm inner diameter 18 gauge jump rings. You can of course use different sizes for this. I would just recommend, because it is important that you have the ratios correct for these, that you experiment with cheaper jump rings rather than jumping straight to sterling silver, just so that you're sure that everything is going to work together properly when you try the different sizes. So you do need to make sure that these smaller rings, the 3.5mm inner diameter that I'm using, if you scale it up or down, you want to make sure that they are a large enough inner diameter that they can go around 4 of these larger rings with a 5th one inserted in the middle. So you need to make sure they're wide enough for that. And then the larger jump rings, you need to make sure they are large enough to completely go around the outside of your smaller jump rings, as you can see there. So we're going to start out by making this line style, because that is the base and the simplest form. So we'll start out with that. So to do that, I'm just going to start by taking 2 of my 6mm inner diameter jump rings that have been closed, and I'm just going to thread these onto a placeholder little twister thing here. You could also use a scrap piece of wire if you like, just something that will hold these and help as we start our weaving that we're going here. So I'm just going to twist that shut, and now I have a little handle that I can hang on to here. So we've got 2 of our 6mm inner diameter jump rings side by side, just threaded onto our little twister here. And then we're going to take 2 of our smaller kind, 3.5mm inner diameter ones, and we'll just open those up. So starting with just one of them, I'm going to put it around both of these larger rings that we have on our holder. So I'm just going to go through both of those, close it on up, and we'll do that exact same thing with the second one. So just opening it on up, and putting it right next to that one we just placed, going around both of our larger rings and closing it on up. There we go. So now we have 2 large ones, 2 small ones, both going through each other. And now what we're going to do is start placing our floating rings, which, as you can see here, going around each of these set of smaller rings, we have a loose floating larger ring that is going around in between, but not actually through any of our other rings. So that's what we're going to place right now. So pulling out one of your larger size rings, we're just going to open it up slightly. And if you're not familiar with opening jump rings, of course you want to be twisting side to side so that they open up like this, and you can close them again flush without deforming your circle, rather than opening them up like that, for example, which, as you can see, has just deformed our circle and is a little hard to recover from. So again, just twisting it open side by side is the correct way to open and close your jump rings. So for this one, what we're going to do is go between these 2 larger rings that we have placed. So it's going to go above one and under the other, and then you want it to go around those 2 smaller rings. So feeding it through there. As you can see, it's going between the 2 larger rings, and then it's going around the 2 smaller rings, if you can see there. And then we will just twist it closed. And that is our first floating ring that we've put in. So let me show you again from the side. It's going between our first 2 larger rings and around our 2 smaller rings. Alright, so now we're going to place some more larger rings. So let's go ahead and pull one out, pop it open. And for this one, what we're going to do is place it through our 2 smaller rings that we have so far, And we're going to put one on the top and one on the bottom of this floating ring that we just placed. So I'm going to take my larger ring, feed it through those two smaller rings, just going on one side of that floating ring, and we're going to twist it closed. And then we're going to do the same thing with another ring, another of our larger ones. But this time we're going to go on the opposite side of where we placed that other one. So we can see here we have it on the bottom. We're going to go through this space on the top now. Alright, and we'll twist that closed. And now we have 4 of those larger rings going through our 2 smaller rings with the floating ring in the center. And we're just going to start repeating this pattern now as long as you want it to make your bracelet or necklace. So go ahead and pull out 2 smaller rings again. We'll pop those open. And I'm going to go around both of our larger rings on the end. And we'll twist that closed. Alright, and we'll do the same thing with another smaller ring. Placing it right next to that one we just did, going around both of those ending larger rings. And twisting it closed. So we should have something like that now. And now it's time to place another of our floating rings, so taking one of the larger ones, just going to open it up slightly. And remember, we want to go between these 2 larger rings and around the 2 smaller ones. So we're just going to insert it in this space right here, just like that. And then twist it closed. Alright. And this is a very easy weave. Once you get the hang of it with a few repetitions, you should start seeing the pattern. So we'll just keep going a little longer so that you can get the hang of it. We're going to open up some more of our larger rings. And remember, now we're going to go on either side of this floating ring we just placed, going through the smaller rings. So going through like that on one side of that floating ring. And we'll close it on up. Grabbing another larger ring here. And we're going to go on the other side now of that floating ring, inserting it through the 2 smaller ones. And closing it on up. Alright, so you can see our design is really starting to take shape now, just like that. Alright, so hopefully you're getting the hang of that. And again, you would just continue this pattern as long as you want. You can do a shorter length for a bracelet, longer for necklace. You can also do just a little chain of these dangling down for an earring. That works as well. You would just take off, once it's as long as you want, you would take off your little twister or placeholder wire here to add some weaving length. You just pop that off. You could put on your bracelet clasps on either side if you're doing a bracelet, or a little ear wire if you're doing a necklace. And as you can see, once we have a longer chain of this, it just turns into a really beautiful, drapey, kind of slinky feeling thing here. And if you guys have never experienced chainmail jewelry, you're in for a treat. It's just, I don't know, it's hard to describe. It's just really fun how it drapes and flows, and it's just really fun to feel and wear, so I highly recommend trying this out. And another fun thing you can do to mix this up is to use mixed metals, do different types of metals. You can replace either these smaller rings or the floating rings with gold colored, for example, to get kind of a cool two-tone look. So you can play around with just replacing different rings with different colors. You could even try using some twisted or patterned jump rings for some or all of the rings. Lots of different things you can do to mix this up and have fun with it. I do like to sometimes do a little fancier with this circular style of the weave. As you can see here, I've turned it into a pair of earrings, and you can also turn it into a necklace like this, where I've got 3 of those little flower motifs with some beads in between, a little bit of chain. So let's go ahead and see how you would do this variant to turn it into a circle shape. Now for this next variation, I will be using slightly different size rings. I'm going to be using some 6mm inner diameter 20 gauge rings for the larger ones, and some 2.5mm inner diameter 22 gauge rings for the smaller ones. You can go ahead and use the exact same sizes as we did for this line style, the 6mm and 3.5mm and 18 gauge. That will work as well. I just like the slightly more delicate, dainty look that these smaller rings gives, and it'll also make the weave slightly tighter so that our little flower shape holds its shape a little bit better when you're hanging it, so that it doesn't get squished and have kind of a longer non-symmetrical shape. But that does make it a little bit trickier to shape these, so I do recommend that you have mastered the line style before you progress to making these little flower motifs. Alright, so we're going to start this out exactly the same way, taking 2 of our larger rings that are closed. We're just going to feed them onto our little handy twister or scrap wire here, so that we have a little something we can hang on to while we're getting started. So we'll just twist that closed. So again, we've got 2 of our larger rings here, and we're just going to do the exact same thing, taking 2 of our smaller ones, running them through both of those, and closing them on up. And we'll grab a second one, run it through both of them, and close it on up. There we go. So we should have 2 larger ones and 2 smaller ones running through each other. Now we're going to take a slightly opened larger one, and we're going to place our first floating one. So it's going to go between these 2 bigger ones and around the 2 smaller ones. Just like that. Then we're going to take 2 more larger ones, and we're going to insert these through the smaller rings, one above and one below that floating ring that we just placed. Twisting it closed. Let's grab another one. And we're going to go right on the other side. And twisting it closed. Okay, so we've got something like that. Now we're going to place 2 more smaller ones, going around both of those larger rings we just placed. At this point, it's time to place another floating ring. So we'll pull out one of our larger ones, going between those 2 larger rings and around the 2 smaller ones. Alright, and then we'll place 2 more larger rings. One going above that floating ring and through the 2 smaller ones. And another one going right below and through those 2 smaller rings. And we're getting close to being done here. Let's just continue our pattern. We're going to place 2 more smaller rings, going around both of those larger ones. And it's time for another floating ring, going between our 2 larger ones, around the 2 smaller ones. And now we're going to place our final pair of 2 larger rings above and below that floating ring. So you should now have something like this with 4 of our 2 sets of larger rings and 3 of our 2 sets of smaller rings. And at this point we can go ahead and remove our little holding twist tie that we were using. So we'll just remove that. And now what we're going to do is bend this around so that it's in a circle shape. So we're just going to bend it all the way around so that these 2 sets of larger rings on the ends are touching each other, just like that. And what we're going to do is connect these 2 rings on these 2 sets of rings on the ends with our fourth set of smaller rings. And this is where it starts to get a little bit tricky. Since we're using the different sizes of rings, things are a little bit tighter fitting, and that is by design, so just bear with it here. So I'm going to go through one set of those larger rings, and then the other set of larger rings with my smaller little jump ring here, and we'll twist that closed. There we go. And then we want to do the same thing with another little smaller ring going right next to that one we just placed. So just looping it around all four of those larger rings. And then twisting it closed. So now all we have to do is place our final fourth floating ring. As you can see there, we need one more on the top, and this is the trickiest bit, but we will just take it slow and keep tweaking it until it fits. So let's pop that one open, and we're just going to feed it through this space here, so going between all the rings into the middle here, and it can help you fit it in if you kind of flex this shape so that it becomes slightly concave. That can spread those rings apart enough that there's room for you to insert this through. And then we're going to go through the other set and finally all the way around. Just like that. And we will twist this final ring closed. So you should have something shaped like that now. Nice little circular, kind of flower looking, Celtic inspired little motif. And if you want any help turning these into bracelets, necklaces, or earrings, I do have multiple tutorials on my channel for how to make your own hand-wrapped clasps, your own ear wires, all of that good stuff. So go ahead and check that out if you need some help with the next steps for actually turning these into pieces of jewelry. As you can see here, I have made a little pair of earrings with this motif just by using one per earring, adding some ear wires, and then a little dangled bracelet bead there, so pretty simple to turn into a really pretty pair of earrings. And again, you can also turn this into a necklace. You could just string a bunch of these together in a line. For here, I did kind of a different style with just 3 of them with some beads in between, and again a little dangled bracelet there at the bottom. So lots of different things you can do with this. You can even intersperse the line style weave here with some of these little flowers. You can intersperse those. Lots of different ways you can mix this up to make tons of different fun jewelry designs. So I really hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial, found it helpful and easy to follow. Feel free to leave me a comment below if you have any questions along the way about how to make this. And I would also love to see photos of your finished designs. You can check the description section below for links to my social media pages where you can share those with me. If you guys did find this tutorial helpful, please hit that thumbs up button and also consider subscribing so that you will be notified when I post new videos. Thank you guys so very much for watching. I hope you are staying safe and well. I will see you in the next video. Happy crafting!